Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and thank you for joining me tonight here on this broadcast, Tonight in North America. We have two great guests coming on tonight. Tanner's going to be with us in a few minutes from Canada. He's a young fellow that's been right at the forefront of fighting for freedom, liberty, and individual rights, and it's certainly an honor to have him on tonight. And then we have from the United States, David Frank. You probably never heard of him, but he has come up with a plan to unite people all over the United States and in Canada, if need be, to become one big giant voice against tyranny and against those politicians who are doing everything they could to take away our liberties and our freedoms. But first, I want to give you an update, folks, because many of you have emailed me on the SOS letter campaign. Well, as of today, we've exceeded 10,000 letters, and we are receiving an average of about 1,000 every day. So just keep on sending them in. I want to be able to have enough letters, and I'm talking about between 50,000 and 100,000 to do what we want to do with them. And that is to, A, get the media to look at all of these letters, request that the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government understand what's going on in Canada, and more so understand that what is going on in Canada is becoming a national security issue for the United States. That'll be our job here to convince our lawmakers to understand that, because we're going to bring these letters to the United States Congress when we have enough of them. They're going to hear from the people. They're going to hear from you. But what's kind of unexpected and exciting about receiving these letters, we have received letters from Poland, from Portugal, from the Netherlands. And as we go through the stacks of mail, we're finding more and more people from different countries are responding to the call of the Canadians who need help. They need help in making sure that their country does not become a communist country. And as I said all along, folks, what you're proving, and this is very, very important, you are proving that it is very, very effective to work within the framework of the law in a very methodical and strategic and tactical manner. And there's nothing that any tyrant can do about that. So this is what I say to all of you: job well done, and let us keep this up, because it is very critically important that we continue with this effort. All right, let's get our buddy here, Tanner. Tanner, do you hear me loud and clear?
I hear you great. Can you hear me?
Well, all I can say is, whew, thank God. A little inside joke, folks. I had some issues today, and one day, well, you'll find out about that. Tanner, thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk to you about a few issues, in particular one, and then I'm going to leave it to you to help us out here in America to understand what's going on there. By the way, let's start with C-11, because we've been working on that. Folks, the good news is, and Tanner, I don't know if you know this, is that Jesse Waters on Fox News, he did a bit of a special on what is going on in Canada, and part of that special had something to do with C-11. But what I thought was astonishing, and this is very important for the Canadian people to understand, because your voice is being heard worldwide. You probably can't see this because it's backwards, but this is a full page, Tanner, an absolute full page in an international newspaper, okay? I mean, the whole page, it's right here. And the headline is, well, if I could find it. Okay, the headline is this: Canada, with Bill C-11 now law, what to watch out for to fight online censorship. A whole page went worldwide. So what you're doing, folks, what Tanner's doing and what others are doing in your country to heighten the awareness of people around the world, well, it's working. So Tanner, it is working. How are things going now with C-11? I know it passed, but we're hearing a lot of different information coming our way. Maybe you could help us build a frame around this.
Right, sure. Well, first of all, I think that's so encouraging to hear that the message of just how dangerous online censorship is and Bill C-11 is reaching all across the world. That bill C-11, is probably one of, if not the most dictatorial bill that not only this government has passed, but I would argue all governments since the inception of Canada itself has passed. When you read the contents of exactly what is in there and what powers it gives the federal government to do with regards to online content, it's something straight out of a communist playbook. It's something straight out of the USSR. If the USSR, in Stalin's era, were manifested in Canada today. What it does, put simply, is it gives the government, and they call it, of course, the CRTC, this our regulatory board for radio and telecommunications. But really, it doesn't matter because it's overseen by the federal government. So what it does is it gives the federal government the power to regulate what content they deem as either Canadian enough or not Canadian enough. So that is, if you have a program and the federal government says, there isn't enough Canadian influence in that program, there isn't enough Canadian information in that program or that broadcast or that podcast, et cetera, we don't think there's enough of those things. And so we're going to force algorithms to lower that content on your feed. It's going to go lower and lower on your social media pages and so on. So you have less of an opportunity and less of a chance to see it. Now, of course, you and I know that when the government talks about Canadian heritage and programs being Canadian or not Canadian enough, what they really mean is whether or not said programs talk about the truth. If a broadcast or a podcast speaks truth and calls out Trudeau's corruption for what it is, and calls out the dictatorial actions of our federal government for what they are, then that program will be labeled anti-Canadian. They'll say the values that are being expressed in that broadcast aren't the values that Canadians share. And so it's going to be, throttled and censored with regards to its production. On the other hand, if the program is pro-Trudeau and pro-liberal ideology and pro-big government, and this modern globalist agenda, then it's going to be put front and center because it's promoting Canadian identity and Canadian values. And so that bill itself is one of the most Orwellian bills that our government has passed. If I were to say one thing, to your American citizens and to people all around the world, it's just to know just how bad, this government is. I don't know that it's even possible to sufficiently comprehend how tyrannical and dictatorial this government is. And just at the speed by which they're moving is devastating. The speed at which they're passing all of these bills. There are more bills in the House, like Bill C-18 and so on, which also increase censorship. The speed at which they're passing those bills is something that most individuals, by the time they see what's happening, it's too late. The bill is already passed. And so all of us up here are so grateful for your efforts and for programs like Walters and so on, who are bringing to light just how bad and dangerous in regards to C-11 that bill is.
Tanner, I've expressed to people the importance of these letters. Look at the media is optics, all optics. We could actually make a phone call, tell people to call and send individual letters, but you bring 100,000 letters to the doorstep of Fox News, Newsmax, One America News, that's gonna raise some eyebrows. And let them know that these are individual letters from people that are warning us. The Canadians are doing us a favor, my American fellow citizens. They're doing us a favor, warning us that north of our border, there is a regime being created, as Tanner said, out of the playbook of Stalin, Marx, and Lenin. This is all about the Chinese Communist Party, the World Economic Forum. It's all about enslaving people, in my view. Now, Tanner, I would expect, and I hope I'm wrong, that once they really go full throttle on this, we probably will be one of the broadcasts that will be either filtered or banned. What amazes me is that we have a lot of Canadian content on our broadcast. In fact, 30 minutes of the content that we have in an hour broadcast is devoted to Canada. It's devoted to the tyrant named Justin Trudeau. It's devoted to the, and I don't like calling names, but you know what? I'll tell it like it is. The cowards in your parliament. Now, we have cowards in our Congress, but not all of them are cowards. We got congressional representatives now standing up. In fact, articles of impeachment as of today were presented to the Congress. Impeaching who? Well, Joe Biden. Now, we'll see where that goes. But at least they stood up and they're fighting. In fact, there are others they are seeking to remove from Congress, including Adam Schiff. Could you imagine that? So we have some pretty brave, courageous leaders here. But I'm yet to hear from or see any courageous leader in your country stand up. And that bothers me. Either they're all bought off or they're just so afraid of their own shadows And for the sake of the American people, I'm saying that because I've gotten a lot of questions from my fellow citizens. Where are the leaders in Canada that believe in freedom and liberty? Tanner, they all can't be enslaved to the CCP. Could they?
Right. Oh, I think your comments are exactly correct. You know, compared to America, our leaders, and you use leaders with air quotes, all of them, or the vast majority of them, are so progressive and so saturated with a modern ideal of morals that any sort of real leadership at all is absent from our nation. As far as I'm concerned, the first thing that our leaders have to do and the nation has to do, if we want to reverse this trend, is repent of its sins and get on its knees. The nation needs to get on its knees and pray. You know, we've been looking and looking for salvation from a leader. And as our leaders are so graciously showing us, salvation and hope doesn't come from them. Because, like you mentioned, we hear all of these tyrannical policies that are being imposed. And it seems like all of the leaders just, whether they outwardly agree with it or not, allow these bills to be passed. For example, the way it works in Canada in the federal government, if you want to pass a bill like C11, it has to go through the House of Commons, and then it has to go through the Senate to be approved. And that order can be reversed, but that's not the point. What matters is it has to go through two different houses. Well, C11 goes to the Senate, and the Senate says this isn't a good bill. And so they send it back to the House. This is Trudeau's House. And Trudeau, they don't really make any significant changes, but they maybe tweak one or two things. But the bill is still awful. It's as bad as it was when it was first designed and imposed or debated. Well, then the bill goes back to the Senate, and the Senate rolls over, and the Senate passes the bill. They say, yep, it's good to go. And so we're seeing more and more of these situations where our leaders and our bureaucrats, who are supposed to be, again, I'm using quotes, a check and balance on power, aren't that much of a check and balance on power at all. And so I think what you, for example, and what your group is doing, and what individual citizens are doing by standing up for themselves and congregating in groups and organizing themselves peacefully and legally and so on to affect political change are much more effective. And they are demonstrating morality to a much higher degree than what our members of parliament are currently doing so right now.
Well, hold on, Tanner. Hold on, Tanner. I got your back.
Oh, did you lose me? There we go.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of a problem on our end.
That's fine. Anyways, I think your comments are exactly correct. And so again, to the nation, I would say, repent first, seek the Lord's face, and before all of the economics and all of these other problems are going to change, the morality of these politicians and our leaders have to change first. The foundation is rotting. It's rotted. And so you have to tear out the foundation and re-pour new concrete that's solid and steady, and then build up, rather than try and go from the top down, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Interesting enough, I wake up every morning at 4 a.m., not voluntarily. I have a German Shepherd who likes to play catch. But when he wakes me up, I immediately go to my Bible, and I read a lot about Charles Spurgeon's commentary. And it's interesting you mentioned the power of prayer and power, because I read this morning where Spurgeon had mentioned that all of these dictatorial leaders written about in the Bible eventually meet a very horrific, terrible end, every single one of them. And he warns them, God that is, warns them again and again and again to turn their ways. But the interesting thing, and you nailed it, is that the way this works is that the power of the people is not only in putting their faith to work, but also in prayer. And I cannot overemphasize that enough. People will think, well, I pray, what does it do? But that is our most powerful weapon, at least in my view, against tyranny and against those bad people. Look, I've been in law enforcement my whole life, military intelligence, and I don't like to use the term, well, that person's a bad person, but unless they're really bad. But these people are not only bad, they're evil. And they may not even know they're evil, but we know they're evil, and we know they're bad, and we know we have the power to overcome them. And that is through the power of prayer, as well as putting our faith to work, whether we write letters, whether we support all of the live streaming going on in Canada and your broadcast and others. We could certainly be very, very effective when we seek God and when we seek the Lord and he guides us. And I'm glad you brought that up. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that is very, very important. With regard to diversions, let's talk about that. Now, in America, and I'm sure in Canada, you're getting tons of emails, folks, all kinds of conspiracy theories. A little something happened in South Carolina, and all of a sudden, Red China's involved, or the Russians are involved. No basis of all this stuff, but they're pounding away. And what did they say years ago? If you tell a lie enough, people are going to believe it. So if I'd like you to speak to that point, that people need to just delete this stuff. Don't share it. Don't say, hey, look what I got on the internet. Just don't share it. And if you could just reinforce that, because you're one of the guys that talks truth, you're credible, you have information that people need to hear, but they need to hear the truth. And that is what you're giving them.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. But you're quite right. Like, the scriptures are clear. It's don't indulge a lie. And we live in a world where information is so instantaneous that, actually, this is a Spurgeon quote too. Speaking of Spurgeon, Spurgeon has a quote where he goes, a lie can go all the way around the world before the truth has a chance to put on its shoes. And that's exactly correct. And so in this age of not only instantaneous information, but also information which is suspect, which isn't necessarily credible, and which comes from ideologues and activists that are trying to promote an agenda which is explicitly anti-human. When you read about these agendas, Trudeau's example is a good example of agendas that are anti-human and anti-Christ. As individuals, we have absolutely no part or no reason to take part in any of that sort of information, which is entirely incorrect. I just did a video today on how, and this is with regards to political leaders, but I think it applies to this example as well, how as political leaders, but also as individuals, you and I, we have absolutely no business in compromising morals or compromising what we believe to be true in the name of, for example, winning an election or generating views on a website, or hoping to find the newest gossip, and so on and so on. If you have to compromise your morals, say, to win an election, then the election shouldn't be won. Or if you have to, read an article which the information is suspect, the information isn't necessarily true or is leaky at best, and yet you still decide to post it or share it because you want to hopefully generate some discussion, or perhaps receive some views on your page, et cetera, et cetera. If you have to do that, then discussion doesn't need to be had, or the page doesn't deserve to have the views. We're in a situation right now where morality is already so muddy in our modern world. Everything which is right side up is upside down, and everything which should be upside down is now right side up. Everything's inverted. Things which Isaiah says this happens. This is on Isaiah 5:20. He's like, everything which is right is wrong, and everything which is wrong is right, and dark is light, and light is dark, and sweet is bitter, and bitter is sweet. And so in the same way, because you and I and your audience understand the truth, and because we understand just how easy it is for individuals to become confused about what's right and what's wrong, especially as the mainstream media promotes more lies and promotes more information which is incorrect, and as politicians do the same, then we have an obligation in any instance, but especially in this instance, to be so airtight and so careful with what we look at, what we watch, what we share, what we read, how we read it, where we get our information from, and so on, to keep that morality and to keep the truth as concrete as possible.
Tanner, over the past 48 hours, I've received maybe close to 1,000 emails about something going on in Alberta. Now, I don't know if some of the information people in your country are getting is true or not. So maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I want to ask you this question. Most of the emails are saying this, that there are fires out there, that they're being set deliberately, and they're being set to confiscate weapons from people. In other words, they're saying in the emails that the firefighters are going in with the police and everybody under the sun going into these homes and just illegally confiscating weapons. I don't have any information that could corroborate that. Maybe you do, but this is an example of, folks, unless you get it corroborated, because it causes panic. But if it's happening, yes, it's a real concern. Anything you could add to that, Tanner?
Well, that's an excellent question. So I did a video last week asking the question, are all of these fires in Alberta being intentionally set, or the vast majority of them being intentionally set? Because when you listen to individuals who are living around the fires, or who have a working knowledge of the way fire operates, or who have lived up north where it's full of bush and forest all their lives, almost all of them are saying something here is wrong. The patterns of the fires is strange, to say the least. To say the least, it's strange. It's not coincidental. I believe that even though it's early spring, it's happening in what many are deeming a pivotal election year. Even today, I just read that over 80% or 80% of Alberta's oil sands are right now at risk for shutting in or shutting down or being damaged because of the fires. Now, that's a big deal when you realize that Alberta has, it's either the third largest oil reserves in the world. We produce some 3.4 million barrels of bitumen oil every single day, which is, that's an unbelievable amount. And I know that America relies on a lot of it. We ship a lot of oil to America. So when you hear that 80% of our oil sands are at risk of being, shut down or shut in or damaged because of these fires, that again seems so convenient. You begin to ask questions. You can say that's so convenient, and then you have a little wink because something here is going on. And then I was listening to an individual who was confronting his council with regards to their fire response here in Alberta. And this man was giving an account of what was happening. And he said, my friend had a bulldozer, a cat. And he says he was pushing dirt. He was making a fire line, a fire break. And he said as he was doing that, he was later told by authorities that he couldn't do so. He didn't have clearance or something, who knows what, to create this fire break, even though there were no authorities yet fighting the fires. And so again, you have to ask the question, why would it be that, and there are more reports than just this, why would it be that government won't allow private citizens to help fight fires, especially if they're near their homes? But at any rate, why not let the private citizens help? And why are these fires taking such a peculiar path? It's like a straight line. Something strange is going on. And so on. Now, with regards to weapons confiscation, I haven't heard. What I would say, though, is it wouldn't surprise me. I'd be, if proof was generated that displayed that authorities were coming into homes during these fires and taking weapons, I wouldn't blink twice. You see all that Trudeau, and any government for that matter, but Trudeau and his Liberals are capable of, and what they want to accomplish, especially with all of these bills banning weapons in our nation. If that was the case, it wouldn't surprise me for a moment. And I think people are waking up to this. The time for saying, government would never do that, our leaders would never do that, they'd never invoke this policy, they would never exercise this nuclear, arsenal that they have, those times are over. Those times are gone. We've seen what they've done over the last 3 years, let alone the last 10, and it's abundantly clear that except for repenting of their sin and turning to righteousness, these governments will do anything to achieve their objectives.
You brought up the word proof, and that's what I share with people. Look at, as Tanner said, especially the United States government at this point, after the Russiagate hoax, which we just recently found out that Hillary Clinton and that whole crew was behind it. I don't put it past the government doing things that we in the past would say they wouldn't do. But I've always said, and I said this, by the way, to some of the people in our country who said they had enough evidence that there was election fraud. And then we find out that they never had the evidence, that this stuff was going out for whatever reason, and got this whole country in a frenzy. Now, look, I think something went on. All right. No doubt about it. But I'm trying to tell people, look, don't put it past some government operatives sending this stuff out to confuse people, to distract them, to get them away from the real cause, which is to fight for freedom and liberty. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So, folks, I would caution you to this degree. Make sure, because believe it, take it from what we're seeing and what we saw happen in the United States with regard to the election integrity issue, with regard to Russiagate. No proof, absolute no proof at all that these things were going on. And we find out later that in Russiagate, it was a complete lie with regard to the election integrity issues. We're going to be broadcasting with some experts in the near future about that. But my point is this, Tanner, and if you could weigh in on this. What you and I just talked about, I believe, are topics that are weighting us down. They're like anchors. They're holding us down, not enabling a lot of people to move forward. When I hear Americans say, and some Canadians have written say, I'm not going to go vote. I'm not going to get involved. It makes no sense. They've got the control. Tanner, I believe that in Canada, as well as in the United States, we the people who believe in God and country, who believe in the Constitution and your Bill of Rights, I believe we far outnumber the bad guys. I really believe that. So the question is, why aren't the millions and millions of Americans and Canadians going to the polls, standing up and doing what a lot of you all are now doing and a lot of our Americans are doing?
Yes, that's a good question. I would add to that. I would say, even if it were true that the bad guys outnumbered the good guys, and I agree with you that I believe those who share our values and our desires are far more numerous than those who don't. I believe that those who don't and those who are pushing for this radical agenda are a small but vocal, very vocal, and very organized minority of individuals who are exceptionally efficient with politics because they're trained in the liberal arts. And so they make themselves seem much more intimidating than what they actually are. So I believe you're exactly correct. But suppose it were the case that there were, in fact, more of those individuals than there were of us. You could even argue, suppose that every other person.
Oh, I'd stand by there, Tanner. There we
There
go.
you go. We're having fun. Suppose that every person in the world or in the country was opposite your values that you knew to be true, that you knew in the scripture were recorded. Suppose that were the case. Even then, you as an individual, if you were the only one left, have an obligation to speak the truth and to act in accordance with truth and to carry out your rights and freedoms, your voting, all of these things, because that's what's been commanded. If not for the other people's sake, even for your own sake, you and I are one day going to give an account to the Lord Jesus Christ. And I do not for 1 second intend to stand before him and say, well, I thought all hope was lost and I didn't feel like exercising my rights and freedoms that I've been so privileged to have or was so privileged to have on this earth. And so instead, I just did absolutely nothing. I just let all of it waste away. That isn't what I intend to say to him. I intend to say, even in the most insurmountable odds, if there are insurmountable odds, I stood as best I could for truth and freedom and righteousness. You do it for the sake of your own conscience, let alone for the entire nation. Could you imagine, for example, if a time traveler had the opportunity to return back to the year before Stalin's reign? We've been talking about Stalin today, so let's use him as an example. And this time traveler, because he comes from the future, he knew all of the chaos and the destruction and the genocide that Stalin was going to carry out. If that time traveler had that opportunity to go back in time before Stalin's reign and warn the people, he would do so with all of the vigor that he could and all of the zeal that he had, not because he had an obligation to do so. And it might be that not one of those Russians maybe would have listened to him. Maybe they all would have dismissed that individual as someone completely insane. It wouldn't matter. The purpose of that individual doing so, warning everyone, as many people as possible about the dangers of Stalin and what was going to come, was for his own conscience sake. And so to anyone who's feeling discouraged or, perhaps like what they're doing right now doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. If not for the entire society, even for you yourself as an individual, it matters. I believe in this so deeply, and Christ does too. He says, of course, in the scriptures that even if there were no more advocates for truth and freedom, even if there were no other individuals preaching the gospel, the actual rocks would cry out. It's that necessary to exercise the truth, to exercise reality, to exercise freedom, to exercise our rights as often as we can. And then as more and more individuals do so and see others doing so, then of course the majority rises up. And like you mentioned, good does triumph over evil.
Was it Mordecai who told Ruth, it was such a time as this that we were born?
Yes, for Esther, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, look at her. Brilliant example. It's a wonderful example. I'm glad you brought that up. Here you have Esther, who's going against literally the empire of Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes himself, and brilliant political tacticians. And this one woman, because she acted in truth and wisdom and understanding and prayer, completely changed the fate of an entire nation.
Tanner, I'm going to have you back. Would you come back on sometime? I mean, this time just flies by. In fact, I'll probably, if you don't mind, one broadcast, how about you stay a whole hour with me? Would that be okay?
Oh, that'd be so much fun. I have so much fun on your broadcast.
Well, we certainly consider it an honor. Now, I want you, before you go, talk about your broadcast, your podcast, whatever it is, give your website out. And let me ask you something. Do you take donations?
Sure. Well, thank you.
Well, go ahead. Here's what I like to do. All right. This is how Campaign for America also helps out. Let people know how they could contribute to your podcast. Feel free. All right. Just feel free.
Oh, well, thank you. So I have a website. It's just my name, www, and then .tannernadé. I know my name is spelled funny, but it's pronounced Nadé, my first and last name, .com. And there, if you have any viewers who'd like to support me in the work that I'm doing, which is honestly proclaiming truth in every avenue that I can, I speak across the province and in other provinces if possible, or writing articles and so on, producing videos, then if they go to my website, I have a little page there on my website that says support, and it takes the reader through all of the instructions. It's very simple, just like any other page on the internet. The biggest social media page that I currently have is actually Facebook. I produce about 3 or 4 minute videos that just comment on the current news of the day. And it's been such a blessing because our prime minister has been so generous with all of his scandals and all of his corruption that there's never a shortage, as I know you know, of things to talk about. And so I try and do as many of those as often as I can. Longer videos too as well. But at any rate, I make those videos for Facebook and for other sites. And then I write articles on my website and keep everyone updated. And it's the website itself is a hedge almost against censorship. Because as far as I understand, emails and so on haven't been censored yet. We'll see what our dear Prime Minister does. So if your audience wants to find me, it's my website. It's just www.myname, tannernadé.com, or Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Rumble, et cetera, et cetera.
Tanner, thanks so much for joining us. And folks, you support this fellow, okay? He's doing a great work out there. Tanner, we'll see you again. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Well, folks, there we go. What a great guy. I'll tell you, folks in Canada, don't underestimate what you're doing. I mean, look at Tanner's there because of you. Shadow's there because of you. You've got Wayne's there because of you. I mean, you got all kinds of live streaming in your country. So keep up the good work. I mean, and we're going to do everything we can here in the States to heighten the attention or the awareness of the people here in the States. Now, the next guy, David Frank, an extraordinary individual. He's got a blueprint, a plan, if you will, and it's called One Voice. And I thought of Canada right away. Most of what he's going to be saying will certainly be easily created here in the States. But for those of you in Canada, please listen carefully, because there's going to come a time where you're going to have control of your country again. And you might want to use this blueprint. So let's get to him. I interviewed him earlier in the week, and I'm going to just bring him up right now. So stand by. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman actually that I just spoke to you about is on the air now with me, David Frank. David, how are you?
I'm good, Lieutenant Rogers. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for joining us. I've got to tell you, David, you were kind of a godsend, and I'll tell you why. For about a year and a half, people have been asking us here in the United States, from Canada and other countries, where they're trying to unite and fight the good fight of faith for freedom and liberty, but they just don't know how to connect. They just don't know how to get together. And when I heard what you were doing, I said, wow, I mean, this guy is really on the ball. So, David, if you could do a few things for me. First of all, would you tell us who you are, where you're from, and then familiarize us with the need and how you're filling that need in this fight to connect in the fight for freedom and liberty?
Sure. And thank you for your patriotic work. I watch your programs all the time, and you do a terrific job, and it's an honor to be on your show. But my name's Frank. I'm from South Bend, Indiana. I've been an activist for quite some time, ever since I realized that America was not working. And I'm old enough to remember when it did work. When I was growing up, things were great. And over the last 60 years, I've seen our great country go down the proverbial toilet. But then I realized that we don't live in the world that they lived in back in the 1700s. We live in this magical world of communication technology. I mean, look, you and I are, across the country from each other, and we're able to sit here and we can talk to the audience. It's truly amazing. And if you listen to TV, radio, and the internet, people are talking about the problems. And we can talk about the problems until hell freezes over. There are so many problems. In fact, I personally can't think of anything in America that's working today. But we do have this amazing communication technology. And unfortunately, it's being used on us. It's being used to program us to believe things that are not true. A lot of politics, a lot of things that I think the average American doesn't agree with. You turn on the TV, a lot of sex, a lot of violence, programming our society to be not what it should be. So what we're promoting is a plan called One Voice Now, and it does exactly what it says. It gives everyone one voice now. Today, we have the technology to fulfill the Constitution. The Constitution was an attempt to use politicians to give we the people a voice, from back in the 1700s. The Declaration of Independence tells we the people that it's not only our right, but our duty to change the system that we're using, just like they had. And they never dreamt that we were going to have the communication technology that we have today. So what we're saying is this: America owns a TV station. It started back in 1969, and America was excited about it. They thought, hey, public broadcasting, it's actually going to broadcast the public. Well, the last thing the federal and the state and the local government wants is for us really to have a 21st century voice. So what they started doing was they started financing it to make sure that instead of broadcasting the public, we're watching Antique Roadshow and cartoons and 60s music, like that. I believe what we need to do is stand up across the country and actually around the world. I know that you have a lot of people in Canada that watch your program. They have a public broadcasting station too, and it's networked all across America. It's networked all across Canada. They have it really around the world, to tell you the truth. All countries have their own public broadcasting station. So what we want to do as a country is stand up, sort of picking up where Ross Perot left off. Back in the early 90s, he was on Larry King Live, and Larry King said to him, he said, Ross, he said, you're a smart guy. He said, if you ran this country, what would you do? And Ross Perot said, well, I'd build a technological town hall meeting system. And America went crazy. I don't know if you remember this. I think you probably do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And the next day, America put him on the ballot. And unfortunately, the system got to him. He backed out. But I was doing a radio program at that time called Stand Up America that the politicians absolutely hated, because I was telling the people over the radio program that we had the technology where we could have the decisions made by we the people, the way that our founders wanted them to be made. The program got so much pressure that our only talk radio show station was forced to go to music. But we've been pushing it ever since. We have the technology now to fulfill the vision that Ross Perot had. And what we want to do is we want to use our local public broadcasting station. It's a station that we the people own. And we want to demand that it's used to give everyone a voice. And so we want to transform that station. We have all these stations. We've got the food channel, the travel channel, sports channel. We have all these channels, but we don't have the most important channel. And the most important channel is the local issues TV, radio, and internet channel. And what we want to do is we want to use our local public broadcasting facilities to actually broadcast the public. Quite a unique idea, isn't it? Public broadcasting, broadcast the public. And what this station will do is will be a platform in every community, because there are people in your communities right now that have ideas to make education better, environment, taxation, healthcare, infrastructure, whatever it is. But those ideas go nowhere. You know, they say government is where great ideas go to die. What we want to do is we want to use our local public broadcasting facility as our station that gives the people in our community a platform so that they can present their ideas directly to the community over the TV. We'll simulcast it over the radio and live stream it over the internet. And then we'll debate these ideas, because we want people to be educated on these different solutions. And we'll videotape the debate. We'll have a debate on it, videotape it, present that over our local public broadcasting station, simulcast it over the radio, live stream it over the internet. And then when you see an issue that you want to vote on, all you'll do is call a local number. It'll go into a community database. It will have your ID number and PIN number, just like you're calling the credit card company or the bank or whoever anymore. It'll ask for that. It'll ask you what issue number you'd like to vote on. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, count your vote, block you out from voting more than once. And we can now have decisions made in a 21st century way, of the people, by the people, and for the people. The problem that we're having, the reason that we're losing our America, our country, we're using a system out of the 1700s that has not one word of communication technology in it. If you read the Constitution, there's not one word of communication technology in it. The government and corporations are using this communication technology on us. And what we've got to do is we've got to get smart, and we've got to use it for us. And by that, I mean, we have to use the TV to give the people a voice in our community. And you know, like I said, we're voting on American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, CNN. We can vote very simply on these issues. It'll go into one computer database with a backup. It'll count your vote and block you out from voting more than once. And it's really that simple. And
well, David, here, if I may, so where does this begin? Now, you're right about one thing, and I'm thinking, boy, a lot of this has been hidden in plain sight, because you're absolutely correct. I think every town in America, including where I live, we have what we call a local access PBS station.
Yeah.
Some of them are not being used. Some of them, nobody cares. Nobody's on the air. So I think step one is to let people know, hey, look, you've got the resources. But my question to you is this, because I believe a lot of people are asking, well, all well and good. Well, who's going to run the shows, the stations? Is it going to go back to a corporation, or is the government going to control it? Now, we in America know we can control these things. So let's think about step one. How do we organize? How do you get people in these communities to say, okay, we're going to set up a committee and we're going to set up a PBS station here locally?
Absolutely. And what you need is you need a blueprint. You know, whatever you're building, if you're building a bridge, you need a blueprint. A house, you need a blueprint. And if you're building a communication system in your community, you need a blueprint. The blueprint is right there. It's at onevoicenow.org, ONEvoicenow.org. And it will be the station, people in charge of the station. They will use this blueprint for raising, debating, and voting on issues. Now think about it. In your community right now, you have a city council. We have a city council. We have 9 people, average citizens, that sit on the city council. And they're supposed to be representing 267,000 of us. I'm 75 years old now. I've never been asked my opinion on any issue. I have no voice. I have no representation. And this is our opportunity to use today's technology to give people like me and you an equal voice on the issues affecting our lives. We don't have to settle with 9 people making decisions for 267,000. We can now fire up those brain cells, all those 267,000 brain cells in our community. But to answer your question, the blueprint is there at onevoicenow.org. We can't.
I read it.
We're going to take over this station, and we're going to. No, we have to have a format for raising, debating, and voting on issues.
Well, I read the blueprint. Extraordinary work you put into that, and it takes you step by step, just about, on how you could do this. So we can go. And you're absolutely right. It takes the people. It takes a small number of people, by the way, to tell the city council, wherever you are, well, this is PBS. It's supposed to be sponsored by the people. Well, the people are here. This is what we want to do. And then the people, at least in America, they're mandated now, the government, to do this. Now, in Canada, David, the situation there is really bad. The legislature there, Parliament, passed a law that basically is going to filter and censor a lot of media coming in and out of Canada. They took their playbook out of the Communist Manifesto, and I'm not saying that lightly. I mean that.
I know.
But this looks like a plan that could pretty much overcome that, because the people will be communicating perhaps with each other. So they go to your website, they see this plan. And then the step-by-step plan is there, and then they just have to follow that plan and build, correct?
That's right. All they need to do is build a coalition of people in their community demanding it. Dave Frank demanding it is not going to get the job done. We have to stand up, sort of like they did for Ross Perot, but they have to stand up for One Voice Now, and they have to tell their local public broadcasting facilities that we want a voice. That's what we want to use our public broadcasting facility for, to give everyone a voice.
Well, I'm sorry, Dave, to interrupt, but I just want to highlight something. That's all well and good for America, because we know that we can do that. Now, in Canada and some of these other countries, it's different, because the government is funding their media. And the government, I can imagine people in Canada going to Parliament saying, listen, we have a voice and this is what we want. In Canada, unfortunately, at least from what we've seen, these people are being put in jail. I mean, they have no rights. They have no right to free speech.
Right.
They have no right to do this and that. So here's a question for you, all right? And it's going through my mind. How do we, and I might have to talk to you further on this, how do we transmit to Canada like we did with Radio Free Europe? You're setting up Radio Free Canada. How do we do that to get information to the Canadian people that their government is absolutely forbidding that? Not right now, but we believe it's coming.
It's going to take a volume of people to stand up. You know, I was around for Vietnam. We got out of Vietnam because the people in America stood up. And it's time for the American people and the Canadian people to stand, but they have to stand together. The government wants us all divided. That's what politics does. It divides. And what we need to do is come together. As long as we're all going in different directions, they've got us. But as soon as we all stand up with just one idea, just one plan, we want one voice now. This is the way to do it. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This is the plan. We're not fighting the police. We're not fighting the military. We are standing up. We are going to public broadcasting as a coalition, telling the manager there. I can tell you that the manager at my public broadcasting station likes this, but he gets a big fat check from public broadcasting to make sure that nothing changes. But what we have to do is we have to do it in volume. We have to stand up together. We have to go to our public broadcasting facilities and say, this is what we want. We want this facility used in this way to give each and every one of us an equal voice on the issues in our lives, in our communities, in our country, and our world. And until we hook up the tools, you know, you can be the greatest surgeon in the world, but if you don't have tools, your patient's going to die. And that's what's happening in America right now. We're dying because we do not have these amazing, miraculous communication tools put together in the right place. This isn't a lot to ask. And when we throw the ball in the court of public broadcasting, all of a sudden they have to tell us, why we need to be watching Antique Roadshow.
You know, you bring up an interesting point about the tools. We have the tool. The big tool is the Constitution of the United States.
That's
the people
right.
in Canada have their Charter of Rights and Freedoms and their Bill of Rights. And you know, David, I'm thinking as you're speaking, we also have the numbers. We, the people, far outnumber what any of these politicians have.
Absolutely.
They work on fear. And you're right. When you opened up, you talked about they tell us lies after lie after lie. We're just inundated with this stuff. But I've always said this: we can work within the framework of the law because the law is on our side. And all the rallies and all the protests here in America and perhaps in other countries, all well and good to heighten public awareness. But the biggest rally is the one to vote, is to make sure that you go to where these politicians are making speeches and ask them, David, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this. Ask them, are you in favor of a public broadcasting network controlled by the people, of the people, and for the people, and not the government? And if they can't answer that question, you don't want to vote for them.
Well, if they can't answer that question, that means that they don't want to do their job constitutionally, because politicians are not leaders. Somewhere along the line, they switched that leader for representative. They're supposed to be our representatives, not our leaders. They're supposed to be coming out, talking to us, finding out what the majority of us want, getting back on their horses, riding back to Washington, riding to state capitals, riding downtown, and doing what we want. That's why we give them a salary, not to do what they want, but to do what we want, to be representatives. And without this communication technology, they can't do it. I have no representative. I've never had a representative in 75 years. Of all the promises that I've heard politicians make over, I've been paying attention probably 60 years now. I have not seen one fulfilled. They've all been lies. And think of what God's trying to tell us. The word politics. Poly means many. Ticks are bloodsuckers. Politics. That's what they're doing. They're passing laws that are all taxation and punishments, and they're sucking the money out of our communities, leaving our communities broke. We're broke. Our communities are broke.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that about politics. I read this commentary by Charles Spurgeon this morning, great evangelist in his time, and he touched upon what you just said, that you can trust no man, especially in government. Most of them, and Spurgeon was pretty tough on this commentary. He said most of them, if not all of them, will lie. They will not honor God. They will not honor the word. They will not honor their oath, but eventually they lie. Even those who start off sometimes end up down that drastic road. But of course, at the end of their story, it ends rather badly for them. But here's what I want to do as we're talking and as we're going to sum things up. I'm certainly going to have you on again, but I want to do something even more so. I want to offer our listeners, well, first, let me start this way. I'm going to meet with some Republican leaders in the state of New Jersey on a municipal level. And I want to be able to set up, if I can, a Zoom meeting with you and some of this leadership so that they could get those organizations. They're pretty powerful, as you know, these local, municipal, political organizations. But I want to see if we could get you in a Zoom meeting with maybe a half a dozen of them, whatever it takes, to talk to them about doing what you just said. I got to tell you, David, I spoke to a Republican organization it was packed house a couple of weeks ago. And I got to tell you, now that you're talking about this, I'm saying, could you imagine if all those people, if 150 people, 30 people, 40 people, whatever, say, look, we're going to go to our town meeting together, not just a dozen, but why don't 50 of us go? Because you know that if anything shakes a politician, is going to be numbers. So that's number one. So I want to be able to do that. Secondly, I want to be able to use, and I promise God we'll use these resources he's given us any way we could to help in this fight for freedom and liberty. There are people around the world watching. They've been in touch with us. Particularly, I'm concerned about Canada. I'd like to set up a Zoom meeting with you and some of the people from Canada that live in some of the areas, in fact, all of the areas, every province where they are being victimized by the government. And maybe we have a roundtable, David, if you can, with them.
Absolutely.
And what we'll do is we'll urge them, and I'm going to ask you again, urge everyone to get that blueprint. And it doesn't cost any, right? There's no hidden fees, folks. This guy's on a level. He's in we're not in it for the money. We're in it for freedom. But share with them again your website. And folks, if there's an issue regarding you can't get to the website or whatever, you just email us and we'll get it off to David. So what's your website again, David?
It's onevoicenow.org. ONE voicenow.org. There are about 6 pages. There's a video on one of the pages. And sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry. That's great technology. But yes, please go there. This is so simple. This is so simple. Watch issues over the TV, radio, or internet. Vote by phone. Let's go. Let's quit looking for that needle in the haystack. You know, our founders never envisioned that someday, back then, the way they got ideas across was they had to go up from person to person to person and share ideas. They never imagined that someday we would have the technology where the government or us, better yet us, had the technology to talk to the masses, present to the masses. And that's what we have today. It is totally miraculous. 2,000 years ago, Jesus said, there will be a day where the last will be first and the first will be last. That is what One Voice Now is. We don't need 9 people on a city council telling 267,000 people the way things should be. We don't need 545 people in Washington, D.C. telling 330 million people the way things should be, and the same on a state level. We have the technology now to empower each and every person. And we can do this, but I can't do it alone. Let me share something with you, Lieutenant Stephen, or Rogers, I'm sorry. You've got the same problem I do. I have 2 first names too. America went crazy back in 1990. And you remember this, I think. I don't know how old you are, but you look young, but you could have been around for a while.
Oh, I was around.
I think you're in shape. But we saw one person get on national TV, Larry King Live, and I'm telling you, this guy moved America. And all he said was this: technological town hall meeting system. The problem is he thought you build it from the top down. Everything that God gives us that's good for us comes from the ground up. And ground up is how America was built. It was built community by community, and ground up is the way it's going to be rebuilt, community by community. And if we can get just one person, the right person, and I'm thinking an Elon Musk, I'm thinking a Tucker Carlson, I'm thinking a Donald Trump. Oh, They have the ability now to talk to America. They have clout. And that's why I was excited about being on your program. I've seen you on Fox. You do a great job.
Thank you.
But if we can just reach out to one of those people and get this simple plan out to America, I have never seen America so scared in my life. People are scared to death. They're afraid they're going to try and use their debit card and it's going to say 0. They're afraid the electric's going to go off and it's not going to come back on. They know what's happening. They know that there are diabolical people out here financing the people that we trusted to do the right things for us. But they're the Judases. They took the money and they're doing the wrong things out of greed. But we can do this. The politicians are never going to stand up. I mean, unless it's the ones you're talking about that really do care about America and wanting it to change. But it's up to we, the people, to stand up with a plan. You know, we remember seeing the Million Man March and all these marches. They go to they go to Washington and they tell those politicians that what they don't want. But the mistake that we're making is we're not saying what we do want. And what we do want is a voice, because constitutionally, people without voices are slaves. And right now, we're all paying about 60% of what we try and earn to take care of ourselves and our families, and it's being stolen out of unfair taxes, and that tax money is being laundered to corporations. Here's another thing to remember. Corporations, the abbreviation for corporations, CORPS. The only thing that's missing is the silent E, corpse. Death is now running America. And God gave us this amazing, miraculous communication technology. The most intelligent person that I've ever met called me to his bedside. He was my mentor. And he said, always remember, Davy boy, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. That's what I believe.
Well, David, I've got to tell you, what a way to end this segment. Let me share this with you. I'm a big believer in the power of prayer. And so we're going to ask our listeners, and we will hear Campaign for America, pray that God sends the investors. He will. If it's in his will, I believe this is, because the gifts of freedom and liberty are from him. And he ain't going to let any man on earth, whether they're prime minister or president, take that away from us. But we need to put our faith to work. And so we're going to pray to that end. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do what I said I would do with regard to maybe town halls. I'm thinking about a North American town hall to begin with. I got to tell you something you may not know. Campaign for America, number one, I believe, is the only live stream broadcasting organization in the entire nation that's focusing in on what's going on in Canada and trying to do our best to heighten the awareness of our lawmakers. That's number one. Number two, as a result of the Canadian people peacefully rallying for freedom and liberty, as a result of what they did, they ignited a flame in a lot of countries, but particularly here where we have created, the people now, when I say we the people, one of the strongest alliances ever between the people of two countries. Now, certainly we've had an alliance with Canada for as long as we can remember, but never like this. When I'm talking about grassroots people in both countries standing up for freedom and liberty. So when you talk about we the people are the voice of God, you're darn right, because God is putting in our heart, soul, and spirit the words that he wants the people opposed to freedom and liberty that he wants them to hear. Great stuff. So look, we're going to have you back. All right, we'll figure that one out. But first, I want to start when I meet with these individuals and these political organizations, who, by the way, are of a like mind with us, these leaders.
Good.
I want to try to set up some of them town halls. So anything you want to say before we end this segment, David?
First of all, I want to thank you, and not only for allowing me to be on, but for the great work you've done over the years now. You're a true patriot, and it's an honor to be with you. But we can do this. We can do this. But we have to have a plan. You know, like getting back to the Million Man March. Hey, they said what they don't want, but we have to say what we do want. And it's so simple. If we just start saying we want one voice now, that's what we want. And this is the way it works. onevoicenow.org. Can't make it any simpler. And America's a special place, man. We have people from all around the world that have brought their talents to America. It's what made America great. And people around the world that are looking at their governments and are sickened at what they're doing. They're waiting for America to lead. And I believe that if we stand up in America with One Voice Now, people in China will go, hey, look what they're doing in America. Why are we being enslaved by a dictator? Same with Russia, same with all these countries, Afghanistan. What we do in America, they'll do around the world. So let's do it. All we're doing is saying, we want to use our public broadcasting station to give us a voice. That's it. So thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Rogers. I appreciate you very much.
Oh, it is I who thank you, David. It's an honor to know you, and we'll be talking real soon. God bless you, David. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks. What more can I say? What you heard from Tanner tonight, what you heard from David tonight, is something that, well, maybe we had planned this for quite some time, and here's what we had planned. We're shifting from defense to offense. The power and might of the American people, of the Canadian people, and of anybody on the face of this earth who wants to join this effort to fight for freedom and liberty, well, come on board. We're not going to tolerate tyrants anymore. We're not going to tolerate parliaments and congressional representatives and politicians who are going to, as David said, suck the blood out of us. But the surprise we have for them is that we're going to work within the framework of the laws, because it sickens them, folks. I know this, let's say firsthand, that every time I say we're going to work within the framework of the law, it sickens them, because the opposition wants things out of control. They want the people in fear. They want to see rallies disrupted. They want to see violence because it gets right into their narrative. And nobody can convince me different. But what I am convinced about is that there is a God above. He is guiding us. And he has called every single one of us, meaning you who are watching and listening, all of us, to stand tall, to stand firm, and to fight this good fight of faith, first on our knees, in prayer to Jesus Christ, in prayer to God Almighty, and then we pray for the wisdom, the knowledge, and the resources to move forward. We have never, ever before in the history of the United States of America been in a situation that we are in now. And never before, I believe, has Canada been in such a situation, because we have the evil of communism right at our doorstep. Let it be an encouragement to those of you who live in Canada, what's happening in America now as we speak. Investigations are continuing. There are going to be indictments. Articles of impeachment have been submitted by a congressional representative on Joe Biden. I believe that his party, his own Democratic Party, we're now seeing them turn on him. We're seeing Republicans come together, conservatives come together, God-fearing people come together. And what you're not hearing in Canada are the multiple court decisions from local levels to the Supreme Court striking down the woke agenda in the court of law. Abortion, folks, in some states it's being banned, it's being limited, and the courts are standing up for the right to life. We just heard recently the Supreme Court ruled that some of the gun control measures in New York and Illinois and a few other states have been struck down. The Second Amendment is being upheld in many, many venues across this country. What I'm saying is, folks, we managed to go on the offense. And how we did it is this: the moms, the dads, the people who realized that their children's future is at stake decided to make a stand on a local level. I said time and time again, it started off with school boards tossing those clowns out of office and electing to office that mom and that dad who went to those meetings and opposed them. City councils, complete, total city councils from Democrat to Republican. And I can't begin to tell you the number of Democrat candidates who switched their parties. And we're seeing more and more people are now joining the Republican Party, not just because it's a political party, it's because finally we got Republican representatives waking up and saying, you know what, it's time to go on the offense. We got the laws on our side, we've got the power on our side, and as I say, that power is from God, and it is the power of the people. So it's all about us now. And if you have any doubts that you shouldn't be involved, I want you to think about what Mordecai said to Esther. For such a time as this, you were born. And if you can't get out and do things physically, I remember a blind woman years ago calling me, saying, you know, Lieutenant, I want to help you, but I can't, I'm blind. I said, you can help me. She said, how? I said, pray for us. Pray that God gives us the strength, the wisdom. Pray for our needs to be met. A lot goes into what we're doing. A lot goes into what Tanner's doing, what Shadow Davis is doing, and Wayne Peters and Ron Clark and all these people that you see on there. A lot goes into it. But we're here because of you, mainly because of your prayers. So please keep that in mind. If you leave anything, if you go home with anything tonight, go home with this. For such a time as this, God created you. For such a time as this, you were born. All right, next Thursday night, I'll be on with TJ. Remember TJ? We're going to wrap things up for the month. And then beginning July, folks, beginning June, we already have guests lined up, at least on the American side and the Canadian side, all through July. We have some scientists coming on. We're going to be talking about a lot of facts related to vaccine. We are talking to a doctor of forensics who's going to be digging deep into the election integrity issues from a perspective nobody ever heard. And folks, I've got to tell you, I'm just thanking God that he's given us the wherewithal. In fact, I'm surprised we've gotten this far. But we want to go further. Why? We're now on the offense. And when you're on the offense, you know what happens? They lose, we win. Thank you for joining me. See you next week, and God bless you all. Have a great, great weekend.